So I'm really happy to welcome everyone to today's session on practical strategies and suggestions for the return to campus. I understand some of you may have had some experience being on campus during the fall, and others will not have had any experience being on campus until the winter semester. But I think that whatever your level of experience being back on campus, I do believe that everyone will have something to gain from today's session. And it is a real pleasure to welcome today's panelists who will be sharing information and suggestions about the return to on-campus teaching and learning. So I've just added links to view their bios in the chat. And we have with us today Jess Dixon, Professor of Sport Management in the Department of Kinesiology, Lee Wilson, Assistant Professor of Acting in the School of Dramatic Art, Arazu Amadi, Associate Professor in the Department of Electrical and Computer Engineering, Dave Andrews, Professor in the Department of Kinesiology, and Lionel Walsh, Director of the School of Dramatic Art. So welcome again to all of our panelists.
Sorry, I'm just going to make a correction there. I'm not the director anymore.
Oh, my apologies.
I don't want to steal Tina's job.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for the correction.
You're welcome.
I apologize for that. Thank you. Before we begin speaking about a return to our campus, I'd like to take this moment to respectfully acknowledge that the land on which the university rests is the traditional territory of the Three Fires Confederacy of First Nations, comprised of the Ojibwe, the Ottawa, and the Potawatomi peoples. And I think beyond an acknowledgement of land, I think it's also important that I continue to challenge myself and others to recognize the historic and ongoing destructive impacts of colonialism, and to continuously explore ways in which we can be allies and friends and collaborators as we move through life together. And lastly, I'll say that I am deeply grateful to have been born and to live, work, and learn with you all in this wonderful little area of Earth. So let's get into it. And we'll start off with Jess. And Jess, I ask, what are some logistical concerns to consider as we return to campus?
Thanks, Elizabeth, and thanks for the CTL for coordinating today's event. I'm happy to be a part of it. So yes, my day job is professor in the Department of Kinesiology, but I'm moonlighting as the chair of our Return to Campus Action Group, and with that, I've become intimately familiar with the logistics of how things are operating on campus. So I quickly just want to run people through some information just to have an idea of what to expect if it's their first time coming back onto campus in a teaching capacity in the winter term. So the first thing that I think people need to understand and respect is that, before people even get to the classroom, they need to be fully vaccinated. Currently the definition of fully vaccinated for most includes 2 vaccination shots. It remains to be seen whether that changes as we see a number of people getting booster shots, but that information will become available through the ministry if there is an intention to change, and we have we're happy to entertain changes to the vaccination policy if required. So that's the first thing, is that everybody in your classroom will be vaccinated, or they will have received an approved exemption from the university from being vaccinated, but are still participating in a rapid antigen testing program. So they're being tested twice a week. And, hopefully that provides people with some level of comfort that, before they're even getting onto campus and into our buildings, there is some level of safety. Beyond that, before they can enter into any of the buildings, they have to go through a screening process. That screening process is done through the Safe Lancer app. The Safe Lancer app can be done on a smartphone, but there's also a web form version, and there's also a paper version. So there's multiple different ways that people can attest to how they're feeling on a particular day before entering a building. There will be, for many classroom buildings, there will be safety ambassadors at the doors screening people in before they arrive, or they will be scanning in with their swipe card or their QR their swipe card or their UNID card, and that will give them access to the building, and then they will be using their QR code to scan in with the tablets just inside the front entrances of the indicated entrances to buildings. If you are wondering about where the designated entrances are, we have a new app that is available for those using iPhone or Android devices. It's called the Campus Go app. So in addition to having signage on all the buildings, there is also an app that will help you navigate around campus and identify where these locations are. Before they can enter into the building, on top of being able to attest to how they're feeling on a particular day, we have the mask policy. And so there's an expectation that everybody in our buildings will be wearing a mask at all times when they're in the classroom. Now, there are some exceptions for people who may be working in their offices, and there are exceptions for instructors who are standing behind plexiglass barriers that are at least 2 meters away from the front row of class. But there are, besides that, there are very few exceptions to the mask policy. So hopefully that gives people some comfort before they even start their class. Beyond that, going into the start of the new semester, we've created some different rules with respect to physical distancing and capacities in the classrooms. For classes that have less than 75 students, physical distancing is not required. However, where possible, students are going to be encouraged, and there will be signage in the classroom to reinforce this, that they should try to, where possible, leave space that is every other seat when it's possible within a classroom. For classes with more than 75 students, physical distancing is required. But the nature of this physical distancing is a matter of 1 meter between room occupants or sitting in every other seat. Now, based on meetings that we had with the health unit last week, an additional level of concern here is with respect to the need to self-isolate breakthrough cases. And so in order to try to help prevent being required to dismiss entire classes, we will be introducing the need for seating charts. And so there'll be more information circulated in the coming weeks regarding this, but there will be maps of every classroom available for instructors to download and use with their classes, along with some instructions on how to create the seating charts and submit them, so that if the health unit ever asks questions and needs to identify people to self-isolate, we can move quickly to help do that. So please stay tuned for more direction and information on that process. On top of that, we have classroom cleaning that is happening twice daily. There will be disinfectant in the form of wipes and hand sanitizers in all classrooms available for students to clean their work areas, as well as for instructors to clean off the podiums and other areas where they will be working. And there will be all kinds of signage and guidelines available for you. I'm just going to dump into the chat here a little diagram that we've probably seen used in a few other areas, but it just kind of helps to reinforce how the different levels of things that we are doing across campus and in our personal and social lives are working together to help keep us safe. And so I'll share that, and you may see that in some future communications coming forward. And then there will also be some additional information available on the resource document page of the RTC website, which I am also dumping into the chat here. The documents on this page were accurate as of September 2nd. We have updated versions of these documents to reflect some of the changes. Those should be online by next week so that you can integrate them into your syllabi, into your Blackboard sites. Included in that is a orientation video for your students that they can watch before coming to campus, along with a PDF or PowerPoint presentation that you can share with students on the first day to help reinforce many of the things that I have just discussed. So I think that's it for my time, but hopefully that gives you a quick summary of the logistical issues. I see some questions in the chat. I'll try to respond to those while we turn it over to the next speaker.
Thank you, Jess. And yeah, any questions that maybe we don't get to in the chat while the panelists are speaking, I am taking note of them. So they're not going unnoticed, and we will return to them at the end if they aren't responded to in the chat. Thank you very much, Jess, for speaking about the logistics.
Thank you.
Lee, I'm wondering if you might be able to speak a bit about some general classroom management strategies to keep in mind.
Sure, I'd be happy to, and thanks so much for having me. I'll just jump right in. I just wanted to say right off the top, I do realize drama is unique because of our smaller class numbers, and we don't really have designated seating in our studios. So just keep that in mind, because some of the things that I mentioned might be different for yourselves. You also might hear a few points repeated, most probably. But hey, it's health and safety. Can't hear it enough. I hope not to steal any of my colleagues' thunder, but I will just touch on basic considerations, and then my colleagues can expand if I mention anything that they may touch on. The first thing I want to say is keep your sense of humor. You know, when it comes to the technology and everything you're doing, you have to learn how to laugh because of the time we're in, and to have that spirit of generosity. We all forget that sometimes when we get stressed out, and everything works out. We had every major problem that could go wrong happen to us. It all worked out in the end, and you will get it sorted because there's great support. So really the first thing that I've been doing in the face-to-face classes I've been teaching, my TAs have been my rock. You know, I've gone through all the health and safety with them, and we have a pretty good plan. Usually when the students show up, my TA would greet the students one by one and let them into the building or classroom. Like I say, our classes are smaller, so we would show up a little earlier, and this is how we would do it. I would usually get the TA to confirm the students had filled out and have scanned the Lancer app. So the TA would see their Lancer app, would watch them scan it. You have to be very careful because the scanners, sometimes it seems like you've scanned it, and then the students and yourselves are in such a hurry, you leave and you realize that there's a delay and it'll come up saying it didn't read it. So you really have to make sure that that it works and that you scan in. The TA really is your key in supervising the online students. I used my TA with the HyFlex equipment because I was so engaged with the students in the class. You know, I would have my TA always on the technology and the computer, making sure that the students were okay, they were engaged, that there weren't any technology issues, so that they would let me know right away. So that was key for myself. The TA, sometimes I would, you know, it's about engaging the students too, right? And that's the thing that really I took a lot of time to do. So I would have my TA sending students in breakout rooms, doing warm-ups with them, doing any exercises that kind of engages them while I was dealing with maybe something else. The first thing they do when they walk into the room is we would get the students to sanitize their hands when entering the room, and they sanitize their hands when leaving. We also zoned our space, so the students have their own, everything has been socially distanced, mapped out. Like I say, this could be unique for us, but to make sure that there was social distancing happening, we continually wipe down everything because a lot of our students are touching the same things. So when it comes to chairs, doorknobs, you know, because we're doing scenes and monologues and acting, there's props and there's furniture they're sharing. So we wipe down everything after a student uses it. So we've been vigilant about that. The zoning, they're 6x8 squares, I believe. I didn't mention that with the social distancing that we have. I always recommended with my students to try and get N95 masks if they could. If not, to get a good secure mask. That's the other thing. Our students are speaking a lot and spewing lines, as you all know. So making sure that they have a good mask that's audible, but also protects them and everyone else. Good face shields have been used as well. We did have plexiglass screens that were built that we put sometimes between instructor and the students, or if the students, if they're engaged with each other in a scene or exercise, we would put plexiglass between them for extra security. And another thing I found was important, which is kind of a sidebar from all this practical stuff, is trying to find things that gets the students to use their imagination and to transport them in their minds during this time. We do little exercises and stuff about saying what their impulse is, even if they can't do it. There's that thing about being a human being that we've lost. Simple things like greeting and shaking a hand. I would get the students to say, well, my impulse is I really want to shake your hand. To not suppress the human qualities, because I think that's going to have a severe impact with a lot of these students is for forgetting about. I mean, technology does it enough, doesn't it? And now we have to add all this on top of it. But just trying to activate their imagination and getting them to talk about those human qualities, things we can't do, and their frustrations and the challenges, and to talk about them so we're all aware of them and we can all address them. The high flex equipment is amazing. The support is amazing. The TAs that we had were amazing, really helpful. I always try and engage the students with different technology, music, video. We talk about space. We talk about how to move in space. The big thing that I've done is I use tripods, laptops, and the HiFlex together, kind of like a camera 1, 2, and 3, and I use microphones like a talk show. So we have the mic packs that plug directly in, and the mics go right up to the students, and so that they're always audible for everyone. So that's something that's worked really well for us. The soundbar speaks into the TV in the room, so that's been great. I think we got our mics from avshop.ca, so we got those ourselves. But we also had Nick Baker in the Office of Open Learning who worked with us on a lot of this stuff. So I encourage any of you, if you have any questions, I mean, they just rocked it and they made us feel so confident. Our TAs were basically acting as producers with the camera, audio, always checking in with the students. And like I said, again, making sure that you're engaging those students online, because those are the ones you're going to lose. It's not the ones in the classroom. They'll be fine, but it's those ones that are online that we really had an issue with. Using their names, acknowledging them, engaging them in the class. They had a huge, the huge voice in the room when we did have people online. The last thing I'll mention is I did this because we have small classes. I divided up my class into groups. And I don't know if this is something you can do with bigger classes, but I divided them up into groups and I brought them in individually so that you could get the numbers down, but also they get more intensive time. They felt more comfortable with less people in the room. We felt more comfortable, and I found you just got more done and it engaged them in a different way. So I don't know if that's possible where you can break it up in sections or groups, but that worked beautifully for us. And I kept saying to them with the social distancing, your area may seem small, but your space is massive. And that was kind of our philosophy, reminding the students to send their energy and voice beyond the mask, because that's really important too, is going back to those human qualities again about communication and getting past that mask, because you will have problems hearing them sometimes. So I'll just leave it there. Please, if there's anything I've said that you want more clarification, I'll try and address some of the questions. Please feel free to reach out when we start in January. If you need clarification or advice on anything, happy to help out where I can. Thanks, Elizabeth.
Thank you very much, Lee. Thank you. We're moving on now to Arzu. Could you help us think through how we can best coordinate some of our teaching assistants and research assistants being on campus?
Thanks, Elizabeth. Yes, for sure. So what I have a couple of notes, but what I have prepared here mostly for those courses that they have physical laboratory or physical exercises that the students they need to do, and that requires you have a GA or a TA assigned to your course. They are a vital part of this process, and the last thing you want is that there's a confusion between you and your GAs. You want to make sure that you're on the same page as your GAs. So I would start with Form 1. I'm sure that like whoever had GAs, they are aware of the Form 1. So I can't emphasize enough that how important it is to fill that Form 1 properly with all the information and all the detail, because you want to give your GAs enough information, what is expected from them throughout the semester. And if you have a large course like mine, if you have several GAs, I would say anything more than 5 or 6 GAs, it would really help if you assign a head GA to coordinate between the GAs. Something may arise and they need to switch their place with somebody else. So having a head GA would really help for such large courses. And I would also suggest that to have the detail of the schedule and what is required from them and what session they are assigned to give to them early on in the semester, but ensuring that they understand that the schedule may change throughout the semester based on the need. But having sort of a schedule to start with would be very, very helpful for them. They would know that what session they are assigned to and what they are required to do. I would also recommend that perhaps communicate with your IT or your technologist manager to make sure that you have a space for them, you have enough resources for the GAs. Several of my GAs were assigned to be on campus. Most of them were assigned to be on campus, but some of them, they did not have laptop, for example, and some of the computer labs were closed. So I've worked with the IT to make sure that they get a computer that they can use. So if they're going to a lab, they can bring the computer with them to the lab. So to have students who are online and also do their task on campus as well. They may also need a space to sit if they're going through the office hours. They may need to sit in a space that allows, for example, students to enter that office, or if they're helping some students online, they can do that as well. So getting a space for them, getting the computer, getting enough training for them to know that what is expected from them, that would be very helpful. I think more than anything, it's to creating that supportive community. You want your GAs to be on the same page as you are. You want to make sure that they know how they can help your students in your class. So if you have that sort of a supportive community, it would make teaching the course very, very easier. Uh, Also, if we can monitor our GAs when they're on campus. So some of the courses, for example, if you're teaching online, some portion of it is on campus, your GAs are on campus, you want to make sure that the GAs are monitored. If you have a head GA and if for whatever reason you're in a class and you're not able to attend that lab, your head GA can check on your other GAs. But they need to be supported. They need to see the presence of the instructor on campus as well. So you need to be with them in the lab too. One thing that I would highly recommend for those courses that they have back-to-back session, if you have section 1 and section 2 and they're running back-to-back, some students, for whatever reason, they prefer to attend one of the section, maybe because of the timing. So it would be helpful if you know the limit of your room. So to not allow, for example, those students who are in section 2 to attend your section 1 or vice versa. This is not something that you may also get the help of the GAs, one of the GAs, for example, to at the door to make sure that those who are assigned to that section are entering to that section to not overcrowd the room. One other thing for the courses that they have physical lab, and you are assigning a GA to support you in that physical lab, is that you may not run your lab in the same space that you were running your lab pre-COVID. So pre-COVID, you had this small lab, and your students were working in a group in that lab with all the equipment. You may not get that same room to run your labs in next semester. So knowing that which room you're assigned to and you're going to have your lab at, that would be very helpful, because some of the, for example, in engineering, some of the equipment may not exist in that lab that you're assigned to. So that would be helpful. And I would say that having backup plan, anything that Murphy's Law, anything that go wrong will go wrong. So having backup plan would be very helpful. And for designing those physical lab, I would highly recommend that to have different set of labs, having an online lab, an in-person lab, and a lab that can be run both online and in a physical laboratory. One of the things that I found very helpful to run my own lab was that we were pre-recording the laboratory activity. So one of the Gs would record it and I would release it so students would look at that recorded video before coming to the physical lab, and that would help to run the labs more smoothly. And last point that I want to make out is that if you have, again, large class and you have a lot of students in your class, you may want to assign certain GAs to a certain number of students to avoid kind of spreading the virus. So if one GA is assigned to a few groups, they don't go to other groups to help them, and that helps minimize the spread of the virus as well. We also had Microsoft Teams to communicate with the GAs, and that helped a lot. We had a channel exactly for this purpose for our GAs, and we were communicating so everybody would get the message. If anything goes wrong, any emergency comes up and one GA cannot attend, the other GA can fill in. I'm guessing that there are a little bit of time at the end to answer question. If there is any question about that, I would be happy to answer that at the end. Thanks, Elizabeth.
Thank you very much for that. Now, Dave is going to talk to us a bit about planning for contingencies.
Great, thanks very much, Elizabeth. I wanted to start by just describing a few simple things that I used in my classes this term related to planning, just in case things changed or went wrong. So first, I used this slide at the beginning to start a conversation, and I told them things happen and sometimes unexpectedly. I also told them that they understand and will be empathetic when things do go boom, as the slide suggests. In my experience, most students are not trying to take advantage right now and are very open to what they're going through. So like us, sometimes they just get sideswiped and need a bit more time for something or a helping hand. So just because they're back in person doesn't mean that the stressors in their life have disappeared, just like ours. Yeah, next slide, Elizabeth. Assessments are still a huge worry for students, and I think a big worry for instructors too, maybe more than normal. If students are taking assessments in person again, keep in mind that they have not done this in a while, or some may not have done it at all, depending on the level that you're teaching at. So tell them what you are planning ahead of time, and that if you have to change to online or make modifications to the format of the assessments in any way, that their best interests and grades are important to you, and that you won't disadvantage them. Saying that we're in this together did go a long way for me to reduce anxiety in this regard, because I did have to modify as I went based on things that happened in the course. So here's just an excerpt from the course syllabus that I used. Feel free to use it or adapt it as you see fit. But when I went through this part in class, I could tell that they were, they appreciated the openness up front. Next slide. As already been mentioned, I would suggest being prepared every day that you teach to potentially have to switch delivery mode if you have to. This may not happen, but it did happen to me. So for example, if you can't get into a room to meet face-to-face, or you are high flex teaching and the tech goes down without notice, which is what happened to me, I had my laptop and everything queued up, ready to go, and so it only took me a few minutes to get out of the room and to get set up. So I suggest making sure that every student who's in person has the device. They usually do, but make sure that they come with those and know that there may be you may have to switch to another format at some point. Now, for a few observations about students that I think are different than before COVID, at least things that I noticed and have heard since the term started. So next slide, Elizabeth. be prepared for lower attendance than normal. I know that Lee mentioned that he didn't have any issues with attendance in person, but I did. And there are still many reasons why students don't come to class. So don't take it personally, because I started to, and then I started talking to them. So I found that the ones who are there really want to be there, and it's important that you remember that as an instructor. Next slide, please. Also be prepared for students to be less engaged, potentially, to be tired, to be anxious, to be struggling with mental illness. I had a number of students come forward to let me know that during the term. Lack of engagement on their part may not have anything to do with you or what you are doing, so don't read into it necessarily. I misunderstood that this term in one of my classes because I could not read their faces fully to judge how they were doing and feeling. Some students are just tired out and burnt out, plain and simple, just like you. So take a bit of time to connect with them, ask how they are, provide the resources, and just keep in touch with them throughout the term. Okay, last slide. I'd also recommend to be prepared for students to voice concerns about transitioning from online to face-to-face. I've had a lot of conversations with students in my classes, but also across campus recently, and I've heard that they feel that it's going to be impossible to take notes, for example, during synchronous classes without having slides, without having recorded lectures to fall back on. To them, the transition to fully face-to-face is a giant and scary leap. And so I encourage everyone to be proactive in terms of helping them transition to a fully in-person schedule again, keeping in mind that we've been away from this for a while and some have never experienced it yet. So talk to them about note-taking strategies, how to prepare for classes, how to get the most out of the resources available, etc. So I'd just like to wrap up by saying that just offering face-to-face delivery, your impact on students will be tremendous, and they will appreciate what you're doing very much, even if they don't say so. And I lost track of that at one point in this term, so keep it in mind. When you're feeling like you're not engaging them or that things are different with them than what you expected. That's all I have. Thanks, Elizabeth.
Thank you for that, Dave. And last but not least, Lionel, I know some people are kind of concerned about how to plan activities with physical distancing. And so our question for you is active learning possible with physical distancing?
Hi, everybody. I actually, it's so funny because as people were speaking, I was crossing things off my list. And I might wander a bit away from the active learning. So as you can probably guess, active learning is what drama is all about. So we do a whole lot of it. And I found that I had to make adjustments in the exercises and games that we played to accommodate for the students who were online so that they actually felt like they participated. So you need to be thinking of ways to engage the students online that don't leave the ones in front of you not involved, and then the other way around as well. What I tended to do was to focus the camera so that the students online could see the kids in the class and vice versa. And then adjusted games. I'll give you an example, and I know that nobody will be doing this. In one of our warm-ups, it's basically a name game, and you clap at the person and you send them their name or your own. And with the students online, there was no way of telling who I was pointing at. So when they came back to me, I would turn to the students online and go boom, and all of them had to explode and then send it back to me. So if there's ways that you can bridge that gap between the students in class and the students who are online, that's really, really important, I think. Elizabeth was kind enough to send me an article, actually, which I will put in whoops, it won't go in the chat, hold on. And there was some interesting things in there. There it is. One of the things that you can do, and this is something we actually did, everybody brought their computer to class. And there were times when the students would be engaged with the students online through their computer so that they were one-on-one in a breakout room. So that connected the students who were in the class to the students who were online. And it allowed for some interaction. And then what I would do is, and my TAs as well, we would go from one breakout room to another and just see how things were going, see if students had questions, give feedback. In many cases, I would watch a scene and then work it, and I would be on the big screen. So that's another thing to do. And this article actually suggests that you can put students in groups, keep them physically distanced, and then they could go on Zoom themselves in a breakout room. So that was one of the things. And they also mentioned several platforms that you might be able to use, and my list has disappeared. What did I do with it? Well, anyway, the article is there so you can find them yourselves. Some other things, how to use the TAs was already mentioned. And I love that idea of assigning certain TAs to certain groups, because we did that and it was very effective because the students developed a relationship with that TA, and they were able to keep active with the TA as well. Sometimes I would break them off into groups and the TA would lead something, and I would go around and observe. And that was both in the classroom and online. The other thing is, and I don't know what your spaces are like, Lee already mentioned, our floor is taped. There are no seats in our classrooms. They're studio spaces. But if you've got an area that's a big blank area, possibly getting it taped so that, you know, there's a square and then 6 feet from it is another square, etc., so that students know how far apart they are, for when you're doing group presentations, for instance. Sorry, let me just flip over and see if there's anything else I need. I found using the chat really effective. You know, we would do something and then there would be feedback time, and I always ask the students to give feedback to one another so that they engage with one another. And so I had a TA monitoring the chat. If you've got a larger class, you might have to have 2 or 3. And then I would go back and forth so that a student in the physical classroom would make a comment on what was on a scene that they just observed. And then we would go to the chat, see what the comment was, or ask the student to turn on their mic and expand on the comment. And just go back and forth so that the students online feel like they have an engagement with the students who are in the space. The other thing that I think, and you'll have to figure out how you could do this for yourself. In drama, we use a lot of games, but if you can figure out how to insert a game into learning material or doing a test of material, like Play Jeopardy is one example that I thought of. And you can do that sometimes with interactive platforms, or just do it through Zoom. The other thing, this is off topic, but Dave already mentioned something that he put on his course outline about adjustments and things. The thing I want to say right off the top is, as you plan, less is more. I eliminated, I think, 25% from my material from my course plan, just because, as everybody's already said, everything, Murphy's Law, everything that can go wrong will. You know, Open Learning bought these $50,000 TVs with the control center and all this stuff, and they're fabulous when they work. Sometimes you're not going to be able to, for instance, I spent 15 minutes one day trying to put students in a breakout room. It just wouldn't respond. And then when I gave up on it, all of a sudden they were all in a breakout room. Sometimes it would just shut down. And when I had students, TAs on as participants and make them co-hosts, then only I got booted off, so that the class could continue. And sometimes I would get back on, and sometimes we'd end up saying, okay, TA, bring me your computer, set it right here, and I'm going to talk it that way. Angling and I don't know if this is possible in lecture halls, but I angled the TV so that it picked me up on one angle, and I had the students in class on another angle, so I was sort of in the bottom of a V, so that I could easily go back and forth rather than anybody having me with their back to them, and that will help engage them even more. I do recommend that you look at that article. It does name a number of platforms that can be helpful for interactive learning, and rather than just list them off now. And that's, I think, everything that I want to say. Oh, sorry, the course outline. We developed a statement in my department, a series of statements for course outlines that will go on all of our course outlines. So that the students had a sense of continuity between people and between classes. One of them was about the expectation for participation. And I saw that there was a chat about eliminating the participation grade. I kept the participation grade because it encouraged students to be involved. It was only 10%, but I talked to them about how that can make a difference between, let's say, a B and a B plus, or a B plus and an A minus. And I found that most did participate and really felt that they had more fun because of the participation. The other big thing is come into class with compassion. I think Dave and and Lee already said it, and I think actually everybody said something about this, but they sometimes don't even know how disengaged they are, and they need help engaging. And you can really use your TAs if you assign them to certain people, as was suggested. Like each TA is a group of students that they can develop a relationship with and keep an eye on, and then speak privately to them about, I saw that you had your head down. Is there something we can help you with? Is there something you need us to know? And that I had that happen with a couple of students, and in private conversation with the TA rather than with me, the student brought up some very disturbing issues that were going on in her life that were affecting her ability to engage. So that we made adjustments for her and tried to help her re-engage. So I think that's everything I need to say, Elizabeth.
Thank you very much, Lionel. I think that actually many of the questions that have been posted in the chat, I've been keeping track, and so far I don't see any that haven't been answered. But I just want to say thank you again for all of the panelists sharing these really helpful tips and considerations. And I do want to open the floor up to questions. And so if you believe that you've added a question into the chat and it hasn't been answered, please feel free to repost it in the chat. Or you're also welcome to raise your hand. If you click on the icon in the toolbar, it looks like a little smiley face with a hand. There's an option in there to raise your hand. And if you do that, I will take note of that. Lionel, I see you have your hand raised yourself.
Yeah, there was something I meant to say but forgot to say, and it's not about active learning. It was, we were told about the Lancer app and the scanners that are at the doors. You do have to monitor the students. Somebody talked about checking them. Lee, I think it was Lee. We had a student who was denied access. There was nobody checking, and she came to class. The other thing I say to my students, and my classes are small, my largest one next semester will be 26, but we were limited to 8 students in a room. But I would tell them, show up at 10 minutes to when class starts at 10, because you don't want a large group of students coming half an hour early and congregating, because the more time they spend together, the closer they get to each other. And then you come out of your classroom to let them in, and there's all these students who are like in each other's faces, albeit with masks on. But you really need to find strategies for how to admit the students to class so that they social distance. And Jess may have something to say about that, I recognize. Oh, I think his hand is up, actually.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Jess?
Thanks, Elizabeth. Thanks, Lionel. Yeah, I saw some, I heard Lee's comments, and there were some comments in the chat that I responded to. And I think it was Charlene that asked about, using GAs and TAs for checking students in the class. I mean, that there is no expectation. I mean, I think the onus is on the student and all of us to take responsibility for keeping our community safe. And so the expectation is that students are scanning in. Lionel, I do know about some issues that were happening in some of the buildings downtown where there weren't safety ambassadors to start the year, and some students were sneaking into classes where they weren't. What I can say is that classes that are going to be happening during off-peak hours or buildings that do not have safety ambassadors at the doorway to kind of make sure that people are doing it going into the buildings, when they go to swipe in the new year with their either their key fob or their UNID card, if they have not passed the Safe Lancer app, their key fob or their swipe card will not work. So those systems will be synced. And so that is an additional layer that we couldn't implement that in the fall because there was too much of a time delay in syncing those two systems together. But it's fairly instantaneous now, at least inside of a minute, the syncing of those two. So if somebody, in the time if they did the self-assessment in the parking lot, by the time they got to the door, those should be synced so that they can swipe into the building. So that should help alleviate a lot of those concerns, Lionel, and we do know that some of those things happen in the fall, but there should be a lot less of that happening in the winter. It's never going to be perfect because people can hold doors open for others and so forth, but I think we do have to be respectful of the contract language for our GAs and TAs and the Form 1s. If we don't have hours allocated to them doing those kinds of things, they probably shouldn't be responsible for doing it.
Really good points. Thank you both, Lionel and Jess, for sharing that. We do have a question. Brandy, feel welcome to post your question in the chat, or you're also welcome to unmute yourself and share your video if you'd like.
Yeah, thank you. My phone just decided to ring at the exact same time I unmuted myself. Thank you, everybody, for participating in this this event today and giving us some practical strategies. My question is, I'm teaching, it's a medium-sized class, about 45 students in the winter term, and it's my concern today, though, is that it's a 3-hour class. So are there any strategies, because typically in pre-COVID days, we would have a break, students would, get up, use the washroom, come back to class. Are there any strategies for managing 3-hour classes that you could give me today?
Thank you for your question, Brandy. Lionel, do you have a response for that?
Yes. I feel for you, the 3-hour class. I know what that's like. And I think one suggestion is every 15 or 20 minutes, have the students stand up and stretch. As simple as that. And just take a moment so that they're doing something physical. I know you can't be walking around, but that's one of the things that we do. If I have a long class, I'll give breaks more often and then have them doing something physical when they come back in. But taking it every 20 minutes and just doing a stretch will help them not feel so, will help them re-engage, I think.
Thank you for that, Lionel. Do any of the other speakers have anything to add to that? If not, we do have another question. Adriana, you're also welcome to unmute yourself and share your video if you'd like.
Sure. Thank you so much. And thank you to the panelists for all of your expertise as the first individuals who had face-to-face classes. My question concerns labs. And so Wanting to support my lab demonstrators who might be in lab when I am not there and working in very small groups. So in our health and safety documents, we have indicated that we are going to have, marks on the ground for locations for students to stand, but there is going to be movement between stations and between locations. Whenever students have to be within 2 meters from one another, they're going to be wearing masks and a face shield. And limiting exposure, and then also everything is going to be sanitized and wiped and hand sanitizer, all of that. But specifically to the lab demonstrators or the graduate assistants who are going to be helping them at the stations to explain equipment or software. My question is, in labs in the fall, did those individuals, were they behind plexiglass, like moving plexiglass, or was it sufficient just to have them masked and potentially a face shield as well over top of their mask, depending on their own comfort level? I want to make sure that, as people are talking, they tend to get a little closer to one another and might not notice that they're, on the mark on the ground. We're going to keep reminding them, but I want those individuals to be as safe as possible. So wanted to know, like, best practice, if plexiglass is ideal or if it's just to maintain that distancing.
Thank you for your question. Jess, it looks like you have a response.
Well, I don't have a response from an experience standpoint, Adriana, so hopefully someone else on here will. I do know that the definition, like from a policy standpoint, the definition of being a close contact means that you have to be inside of 2 meters physical distance for more than 15 minutes. So from a policy standpoint, there's no risk of your lab instructors or demonstrators violating anything that we're doing on campus. But I'll defer to other people in terms of what, practically speaking, what works for them.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jess.
I believe Lionel and Arazu, both of you have your hands raised. I know, Arazu, you also have some lab experience as well. If either of you want to speak to this.
Sure. Go ahead, Arazu. I'll go after you.
Okay. So you're correct. The GAs needs and the instructor needs to work with the student, right? So the way that we try to minimize this contact is that, as I mentioned, we recorded those same labs before we go to the room, right? So students, they had the recorded video. So if they had any question or concern, they would be able to go to the recorded video to minimize the contact, right? And we also we were using a CI 1100, and there's a camera there, right? So if the GAs needed to point to certain element, I was teaching circuit analysis, right? So if they need to point to a circuit element, they hold it on their camera to show that what's going on, right? But besides that, still there are, in engineering specifically, there are a lot of cases that GAs need to go to the station to see that what's happening. So I made sure that the GAs, at least, and the students in my class, they're using surgical masks. So I wasn't allowing the homemade mask, even though that it was a part of a policy that they could, right? But I made sure that I had very good mask for my GAs, and then I was assigning certain GAs to certain group, and I was giving them, you should have your pen, your own pen and everything. And every time you go to a station, you come back to the main station, you disinfect your, you hand sanitize, and then go to the next station that you're assigned to. I wasn't allowing the GAs to go like, I have like a very large class. I wasn't allowing the GAs to check all of the 300-400 students, right? So they were limited how they could move around in the class to sort of minimize this kind of a contact with the students. But yeah, I fully appreciate the fact that GAs needs and the instructor would be in close contact with some of the students.
Okay. Oh yeah, my microphone's off. What Lee already mentioned, we have plexiglass screens on wheels, and they're quite tall and go down quite low. And when I was moving through the classroom, I would actually just grab it and go around and do what I needed to do. The other thing is, and I think you mentioned that students who might be moving from station to station, put arrows on the floor that this is the direction you go in, right? So it's not always going to be, going the fastest route or the closest route. Sometimes you may have to go all the way around your elbow to get to your nose, so that everybody moves in the same direction. And then you don't get people passing each other or bumping into each other. But I found the screen quite useful. And my students actually use it. I think Lee said this, but they would have it between them. And sometimes they even incorporated it into the scene. So it became a character choice or an action choice. But I think just going around with the screen and I think also go in the lab and do a rehearsal with your TAs or your GAs so that they have the physical experience of what they have to do and it's in their bodies, not just in their minds. So that they are very specifically trained and they have a sense of physically doing it themselves with the other GAs perhaps before they actually have students in there.
Thank you. That's so helpful. We have recorded all the videos and we do the training days with the GAs. And all of those items that you mentioned are pretty much in our health and safety plan. So that puts my mind at ease.
Thank you for that. I know we did have a couple more questions, and I believe a few of our panelists are willing to stick around to answer those questions. But for those of you who have to leave, I do want to share a feedback form in the chat, and I invite you to share your feedback with us. So I've shared that in the chat, and I'd like to thank each of our panelists for openly sharing all of your experiences of what went right and maybe even a little bit of what went wrong. And thank you also to anyone in attendance that's shared questions and contributed to the discussion. I think this discussion so far has been really helpful as we continue to prepare for a return to the on-campus experience. And for those of you who have to leave, I wish you all a good afternoon and a restful break. But as I mentioned, we do have some panelists who are able and willing to stick around to answer some more questions. And right now we do have another question from Victor. Feel free to unmute yourself and share your screen.
Yes, thank you. I'm returning to class, and the interesting thing is I want to present things normally, but I also want to try not as an official thing that I'm doing. I want to try a little bit the HyFlex component just for training for myself. So I would like to. I have an online script, I will have videos, but and I want to use the online script. I don't want to use a camera, but I would like to use a microphone so that the session can be recorded. My question is, can I just plug in via USB my microphone that I use here, and then that would work with Blackboard, of course. Is that a viable way to do that so that the session can be recorded? More or less, most of the things would be shown then on the screen, and I would be more or less around the computer and doing or presenting the session. Is that a viable way, or do you have microphones there now in your systems and cameras, or is that something that I could take with me and just plug in? That's the question. Thank you.
Do you want me to take a stab at that?
Yeah, if you'd be willing, for sure. Thanks, Jess.
Thanks, Victor. I think the answer to your question, it really depends on which classroom you're going to be in, because some of the classrooms will already be pre-outfitted for capturing HyFlex audio visual. Others will not. So for those that have it, I would encourage you to sign up for a session to have somebody in the CTL or Office of Open Learning show you how to use the system to capture it. If not, then probably what you're proposing in terms of inputting an external microphone to capture it, I don't see any reason why that wouldn't work either. But from what I'm hearing of your description, I think it would really come down to what classroom you're in and what technology is in place.
So Blackboard will work in all systems, and I could just switch on a microphone and then make something like an MP3 recording with the visual that I have on the screen from Blackboard. That would work.
I believe. Yeah, I mean, I think you'd end up having to take the video that is produced through UJA or through Blackboard or whatever software you're using to record it.
Yeah.
And then convert that into an MP3 or something like that, or an MP4. Or
No, it would be a virtual classroom. I would be using virtual classroom, and that would be projected to the students that are there.
Oh,
and I would be using a microphone just to record it. So as if I were at home, but just being there and presence and using instead of a chalkboard, I'd be using just the online materials that I have prepared on Blackboard. Should be working, yeah?
I think
on any of the consoles that we have.
Yeah, I was just going to say, just as long as the classroom has that technology enabled, and I think there's around 20 of them or so across campus, and then there's also some portable units that will be available during the winter semester as well. But I think that would be the only delimiting factor to do what you want to do.
Okay, well then, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Lee, I see you have your hand raised. Do you have anything to add to that? Yeah.
Yeah, I do. I mean, I'm just going to back up, what Jess said there, because we're doing all of that, Victor. And I mean, we are unique, and we worked with them with the technology, and we had a couple of meetings to tell them what we needed, and they figured it out for us. We did buy our own microphones. I've got the website that we got the stuff. If you're interested in that we bought that.
Oh,
I think he froze.
We're frozen.
Yeah.
Okay, while we wait maybe for Lee to come back to us, Victor, I see your hand is still raised. Do you have a follow-up to that?
No, it's okay. I think that as long as I can use my material that I have here, I don't need a camera per se, so that would be much easier to work with. Just working with the Blackboard online script that I have, and videos and embedded things that I have, but I can do that all through the online system. Then I think I'm quite fine, because with cameras it's much more difficult. Who will follow the camera? You will need somebody else. But if it's done just as more or less an MP3, a visual MP3 with the materials that I have online, then I think that should work. It's
actually Victor, the mobile unit camera has a really good algorithm for tracking the speaker. It's not particularly good for capturing a whiteboard, but it certainly does a good job of following you around the room.
Oh, okay. So if that works, I will try. I'm not declaring this a HyFlex course, but I'm training with it on and just to see if it works and if it can be used later on. It's just for me also, it's an experience thing, but I do not want to make too many experiments with my students if I do not know the system well. So I'm face to face, and this is the mode. But if we have to go online or something like that, then the material is there, they can work with it. And I have then later more flexibility, because I suspect we will be back home with this virus that is coming our way. Well then, thank you very much. And now I have a clearer view that things can be done as I imagined them. Thank you.
Thank you. Abdo, I've seen your hand raised a couple times, but I just seen it lower, so I'm not sure if you still have a question. If you do, feel free to raise your hand again, but in the meantime, I'll move on. We do have another question. Bao, feel free to unmute yourself and share your question.
Okay, good afternoon now, not morning anymore. I'm from engineering, and I think I heard lots of helpful suggestions today. I do have one suggestion, because engineering has usually have big class, there should be some different practice. So if it is possible, could you please organize some kind of similar seminar and bring some engineering faculty members, who who has some experience, to teach face to face. I don't know who has that yet. So, and then we can make engineering faculty ready for next term. This is the first one. Another one, I have one question, specific question for the classroom. I did visit the classroom. I see some new equipment, but I don't know if I need any particular training for that type of equipment in my classroom, that in CEI. So if I need it, so who will be the one to contact so that I can have someone to help me to get familiar with the equipment?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do any of our panelists, I know the Office of Open Learning, and there are individuals from IT that can come out, and I'll put some links in the chat, but Jess, if you want to share some of that.
Yeah, I mean, so the Center for Teaching and Learning, Office of Open Learning, and IT Services have been offering workshops dating back to the end of summer and the start of the fall semester. They ran workshops, I believe, last week, and will be running additional workshops in the new year. I believe there is also an opportunity for individual instructors to book individual opportunities to get practice using the equipment in their classrooms. This information, I mean, I know I've been receiving it as an instructor, not in my position. So, I've been working under the assumption that other instructors have been receiving those invitations to participate as well. Yeah, I think probably following up with maybe Elizabeth to kind of put you in touch with where those workshops are, and there you go. Elizabeth's right on top of it. Sign up for one of those workshops, and that you'll get all your questions answered.
Yeah, thank you. But do we have any code for the computer for different room, or some general code written somewhere? We have to call someone.
Yeah, again, all that stuff is going to be available for you. My understanding is the new technology in the classrooms is pretty sensitive, and they don't want people who haven't received training on them to be fiddling with them. So my recommendation is that you go through a workshop. They'll instruct you on how to do it, because one little mishap could make it very difficult for everybody else that needs to use that classroom for the start of the new year. So my recommendation is to sign up for one of the workshops and then proceed accordingly.
That's a good point. That's why I asked questions before I go there. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
For sure, thank you. I did add links to the OOL registration for their workshops, OOL site for registration, CTL site as well, and then a link to IT support. And I just wanted to add as well that Arzu Amadi that joined us, she's in engineering, and she did have some experience with in-person teaching this semester, and also maybe more so with coordinating the in-person presence of graduate assistants and teaching assistants. And so I invite you also, if you have some specific questions related to the engineering faculty, if you want to reach out to Dr. Amadi, I'm sure she'd be willing to kind of help you with any of your questions as she can.
Okay, thank you.
For sure. And I believe that is our last question. So I again just like to thank everyone here for your contributions to the discussion, and again a really big thank you to our panelists for sharing your thoughts and experiences this semester, and suggestions for next semester. So I wish you all a restful break. And again, I'm just going to add in the feedback form, and I invite anyone to share their feedback with us. Thank you all.